Yo, how you guys doing out there today? I'm your boy Roto Beast. This is my boy Jeremy, aka DFS Dudes. We're here to give you guys a tutorial, just kind of how we build our daily cash lineups and go about our business every single day. First thing that we'll talk about, jumping into this video before we go any further is, hey, let's talk about what a cash lineup is. Real quick before we do jump into breaking down cash lineups, etc. How you doing out there, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm excited to do this kind of tutorial series, let you guys know how we build cash game lineups. We'll follow it up with GPPs and we'll follow it up with a couple of other tutorials. So I'm excited to get into these.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just get started off. I mean, what when you think about a cash game lineup, I mean, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Really a 50-50. I know a lot of people want to get into double ups, triple ups, quintuple ups, two-man leagues, and all of those types of deals. But really, to me, a cash game is a 50-50. And that's because you only have to finish in the top 50%. You start getting into double ups, triple ups, quintuple ups, then we have to get into what the percentage of the payout actually is and where the tournament, or I'm sorry, where the cash line actually falls. So to me, a true cash game is a 50-50 or a heads up.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely would agree. Whenever I play cash games every day, me personally, I just stick with 50-50s. I stick with head-to-head matchups. I mean, you're giving yourself a 50% chance to win. And I mean, those are the best odds that you could really get in daily fantasy sports. So I definitely agree with you. Double ups, I mean, a lot of people do consider double up cash games. I think that you could consider them cash games. I mean, the biggest difference, though, is, I mean, 45% of the people win in a double up compared to 50% in a head to head and in a 50-50 entry. So, I mean, the odds are a little bit less. If you're worried about making a couple extra cents, then, I mean, you could definitely go with double ups. But me personally, I mean, I just stick with 50-50s every single day. Yeah, man. So I think that we're both on the same page of what we think a cash game is. You kind of want to talk about our strategy real quick. We can one thing that I've done year after year. I've been doing providing cash game lineups and content for about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years now. And whenever I get a customer, the first thing, especially when it's a new customer, they ask me, hey, what do you think is the best strategy to play DFS? I mean, me personally, I think the best strategy, and I've been telling people, and Jeremy would probably agree with me, I call it the 80-20 strategy. What we mean by that is, any day, you play, I play a lot more just single entry contests. I play one lineup every day. So I play 80% cash games, which is, 50-50s, head to heads. And then the other 20%, I definitely throw my lineup still in a couple of GPPs, usually single entry GPPs, because I'm more of a cash game player, just to kind of hedge my bets. What I mean by that is, hey, if you have a really good night, you definitely want some kind of exposure in tournaments with your lineup. This way, you have big upside for that night. And if you miss if you miss the tournament line, and you can still definitely win some money on that given night, with 80% of your contest being 50-50s in head to heads, and it'll be a profitable night at the end of the night. Even if you win, $2 is better than losing $2, and you chalk it up as a profit of $2, and you move on to the next day. So yeah, that's really the 80-20 strategy that I've lived by the past 4 to 5 years since I've been playing DFS. And what's your thoughts on my strategy, bro?
I personally think 80-20 is a little conservative, but that's me. My strategy has always been 50-50. So if I'm going to play $10 in tournaments, I'm going to play $10 in cash. And it definitely gives you the same exact hedge that you're talking about, right, with the 80-20 strategy, but it gives you a lot more upside. And you're going to have nights where your cash game lineup is not going to hit. And that's part of the expectation of playing a cash game lineup. If you're playing cash games, the expectation has to be you need to win 4 out of 6 nights. We usually don't play on Sundays, but if you're winning at a 60% clip, you're making money. So setting the expectation. And then I personally played a 50-50 clip because if my cash game lineup doesn't do well, the chances are if we're basing our optimal lineup off our cash game lineup and we're changing parts out as we go in tournaments, I'm going to have lineups that have, a good example would be if Damian Lillard and Russell Westbrook are the same exact price, you may like the floor of Westbrook better than you do the floor of Lillard, but Lillard may give you a little bit better upside because he's not playing in a game where he's sharing usage with James Harden. So you would build that same exact lineup and just make the one switch, Westbrook for Harden, and throw it in a tournament, right? So I'm sorry, Westbrook for Lillard, and throw it in a tournament. So I go 50-50. I think 80-20 in today's environment with where cash game lineups are is conservative, and it's really probably for the beginning player, right? You don't want to just and I think we'll do a video here coming up where we'll get exclusively into bankroll management and our thoughts on bankroll management and define what your bankroll actually is. A lot of people define their bankroll by what their balance is on FanDuel or DraftKings, and that's not really the right way to define what your bankroll actually is when you're breaking down that percentage. So we like to stick to 10%, and then he'll play 80-20, I'll play 50-50. It's just finding that kind of right percentage mix for tournaments to give you the upside, and then the floor of your cash game lineup to kind of give you the opportunity to double your money.
Yeah, for sure. No, I definitely agree with you. And for me personally, when I first started, or when I have, people that are beginning in DFS, I definitely, I do recommend the 80-20 just because, like you said, it is a little bit safer. It's a good way to kind of get your feet in the door and get you going with DFS. Once you play for a little bit, you get a good little hit and you have, some extra money, then definitely you can start toning it down. You can go to 70-30, a 60-40, even a 50-50, like you said. I think as you get more experience in DFS and get a little bit more comfortable with it, then you could definitely kind of start working your way down. But I definitely would agree though. It's 80-20 is more for the beginners. And if you're just starting, play it safe, learn how to play. A lot of people think that, they just see these commercials where somebody won $1 million or something, and they're going to go in and put $100 in FanDuel and play that $100 in one night, lose in that one night, and probably won't play DFS anymore. So definitely you want to get your feet a little bit wet, and then you can kind of start working your way up for sure. Next thing I kind of want to just touch on when we talk about building our cash game lineups. Before we talk about building the actual lineup, I do want to stick with the contest a little bit as we were talking about. One thing that I actually learned from you that really helped me out when we first met is we talked about diversifying your contest. So what we mean by that, so we'll just use, for example, let's just use 80-20 strategy, for example, okay? So say we're going to go, 80-20 strategy. We're going to play $100 in the night. We'll put $20 in GPPs. The other $80, we want it to be cash game. So we would definitely recommend mixing it up. You could go $30 in 50-50s, $30 in head-to-heads, and maybe $20 in double up, something like that. They are still all considered cash games in one way, shape, or form. But you win in different ways. The lines are going to be different on the contest. So I definitely think that diversifying your entries is one big part of kind of being successful long term and kind of being profitable as well. What's your thoughts on diversifying your entries?
You have to look at this as an investment. There's too many people that look at this as if it's gambling or they're making bets, and that's not what you're doing. You're making an investment and you're buying stock every single day. So it's all about what type of strategy you want to use as far as defining what your bankroll is, defining floor, defining the upside plays, etc. So when it comes to the diversification part of it, a lot of people, because the tab will be like, cash games or 50-50s or double ups, they'll get into quintuple ups, they'll get into triple ups, they'll get into these things. And a true 50-50, like we talked about, or a true cash game is where 50% of the field has an opportunity to get paid, right? So when you start diversifying it, like you said, you go to double ups, it's a 45% cash rate. And the reason being that you get true 2-to-1 on your money. If it's a $5 double up and you hit, you're going to get $10. If it's a $5 50-50 and you hit, I believe you get $9.50. So you lose 50 cents, but it's a higher payout.
You get $9. So
$9.
So
you lose the dollar, right? So you want to make sure that you do have some diversification, but like you said, a good mix of it is stay away from the triple ups, stay away from the quintuple ups, get a good mix of 50-50s in there. And if you want to get some double ups, fine. But the head-to-heads, the 50-50s is where you want to live and get your feet wet in this with.
Yeah, for sure. Next topic I want to talk about, let's just talk about the difference in a player between having a guy that we want that has a really good ceiling and a guy that has a really good floor, and kind of what kind of player are we looking for, for cash games. And there is definitely some guys that I can think about in NBA that are like optimal cash game plays that we play all the time. So I'll let you get us started with that.
The first thing that you have to define is you need. It used to be right 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 270 cashed. Right, if you had 270 as a score like on FanDuel, you were going to cash. Now you need well over 300. So the old 4x and 5x value is kind of out the window. You need 6x plus. So floor guys, you're looking, can they get me 6 times their price tag? So if it's a guy whose minimum value, like, a Lonnie Walker, who's going to start for DeMar DeRozan, his price tag is 3.5. He's going to start. We only need, 19 points for him it's actually 19 and a half points for him to get us a 6x value. So that's one of the first things that we look at is minutes equal opportunity, opportunity equals production, and production equals fantasy points, right? So that's the first thing we look at. As far as defining a floor player and a ceiling player, James Harden has a much better floor than that example of Lonnie Walker. James Harden, his price tag is also going to be, pushing 10, 11, sometimes 12,000. So it's what their price or what their production is in association with the return on their price tag. And that's, for us, is what we look at. What their average fantasy points are, is kind of what we define as a floor. And then what the highest they've reached from a fantasy production that season is their ceiling. And then we take consistency into that as well. How many times are they hitting 5 and 6x on their current price tag?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whenever I'm identifying guys as a cash game play, as a GPP play, there's a couple of things that I look at. First thing first is I look at a guy. I kind of look at a stat sheet, and I'm not looking at his game logs and saying, "Oh, this guy has scored this and scored this." But what I'm looking at when I look at his stat sheet is, does this guy get his fantasy points only by actually scoring the basketball, or does this guy get in there and get 5 rebounds, 4 assists a night, a steal or 2, a block or 2? All those secondary stats add up, and that's what are the stats that give you a really solid floor. And then if it's a guy like, for example, we'll just throw like, I'll use Rajon Rondo, for example. Rajon Rondo is a guy that whenever he plays minutes, he may only get you, 7 or 8 points in a game, but he's going to get you 7 rebounds. He's going to get you 8 or 9 assists, a steal or 2. And those all, like I said, equal up to he's going to give you, 30 fantasy points a game compared to, we'll say, a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic for Utah. Bojan Bogdanovic he's a guy that, man, he definitely he has upside, and his floor, he has a decent floor, but he's a guy that you need him to score 20 points a night just to get you right around 30 fantasy points, because he'll get you maybe 2 or 3 assists, 2 or 3 rebounds, but he needs those points compared to getting 6 or 7 of each other category. That's really the difference. What I look at is, there's a guy get in there and do a little bit of everything compared to a guy who's very, very scoring dependent. So that's really it. And you're right. It used to always be, we want a guy to give us 5x. If we got 5x from a guy, we would feel really good. We would think that he would be a really solid cash player. I would say probably these past 2 years, it's kind of went up now. Now it's probably about, sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes you can get away with 5x, and I still play guys that I feel will give me at least a 5x floor, but you really need about a 6x now, with just the fact that cash games have been so high, especially as you get more into seasons, people start getting hurt, there's more obvious plays on the slate, people start getting really, really chalky, and then that's when it's tougher to really use guys at a 5x, when there's chalk guys that are going to get you 6 or 7x. So I think that's really where we're at with that, and I think that kind of leads us into our final topic of what is a chalk player. A chalk player is a guy, we call him basically free squares. A guy that we know. For example, I'm gonna give you a perfect example. Last night, Antetokounmpo was out. Every single time Antetokounmpo is out, there's obvious guys you play. You play Bledsoe, you play Middleton, you play Ilyasova, even Brook Lopez. And all these guys are obvious plays because Antetokounmpo is out. You need somebody else to pick up the production. And since these guys are such obvious plays, they're all 50, 60, even 70% owned. We talked about 50-50s. We'll go back to that. You need to beat at least 50% of people in a 100-man contest. If a guy is 70% owned, then basically almost every single person in that contest has them. So you just got to have him. It's a free square. Everybody's going to have him. You don't overthink it. You just kind of put him in your lineup and you build elsewhere. So that's what we talk about when we talk about free squares, high ownership. That, and usually all that really comes when it starts really getting a really injury time towards like the middle of the seasons.
Right. And just to define a couple of things a little bit further, when we talk about 5X and 6X, we'll use FanDuel as an example. They give you $60,000 to build out your lineup. You put that as 6.0 times 5, that's 300, right? So you need 300 points would get you if everybody in your lineup returned you 5X on that price tag. So, I would say the sweet spot right now in cash games is on FanDuel, at least, is probably in the 320s. You're probably pretty safe on most nights, but we've seen it get as high where it gets carried away and it's 375 to 385 on just stupid nights. So in those cases, you need 6X, 7X plus. But kind of what the barometer that we've always used is figuring out what that 5 to 6X figure is. What's the consistency and how often is that person getting that many fantasy points to what their current price tag is on either FanDuel or DraftKings. So, yeah, I think we can move on to the next part, which is I think we're going to talk about ceiling and floor, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we could quickly touch on that. What's your thoughts? I feel like I kind of touched that a little bit already. So go ahead and finish us off with that.
I just kind of want to piggyback off a couple of things. You won't see us put like a CJ McCollum in a cash game lineup unless you're going to have obvious spot where Damian Lillard's going to be out and he's going to have to distribute the basketball a little bit. You won't see us play Bogdanovich in a cash game lineup. To your point, you won't see us play guys that are super scoring dependent because they're very sealed. Because they're so scoring dependent, their ceiling is kind of limited. They don't do all of the ancillary things that you talked about, right? So we're looking for those guys day in and day out for our cash games.
Go ahead. I was gonna say another guy. Just give you another example. Would be like a guy like JJ Redick.
Right. JJ Redick was a guy that we liked going into tonight's slate, but strictly for tournament purposes because
right.
See him cash game lineup because JJ Redick's a shooter. He's not a rebounder and a defender and all these other things. So that's kind of what we're looking for. Just want to make sure we define how we come up with value and what the standard way in the industry is to figure out what value is. 300 points used to be the benchmark. It's probably more like 320 to 325. So you need, 5 to 5.5 X on a player's price tag. So if they're a $6,000 player, you need 33 fantasy points for them to hit 5X. You need 36 fantasy points for them to hit 6X. What's the probability of that player hitting that? How often do they hit that? And then do they do all of the little things to, if they go 1 for 13 from the field, do they get to the free throw line, right? Do they rebound? Do they get you any assists? Do they have the opportunity to get you steals? Those are things we look at when we're looking at ceiling versus floor.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. So I think that's what kind of where we're at. We're just kind of a brief overview of our thoughts on cash lineups and cash entries, etc. Make sure to tune in. We're gonna do a bunch more of these tutorial videos. We'll talk about making GPP lineups. Jeremy mentioned it, a bankroll management video. We're also gonna do a full tutorial on how you use our optimizer, all of our tools that we have on the website. So make sure and subscribe to this channel. Make sure to check out the site dfscheatsheet.com. Thanks guys for watching this. Peace out.